On Christmas Day, 2017, a mysterious set of human remains were discovered off the coast of Sandy Point, Australia by a snorkeler. There were no personal items such as clothing or tissue among the remains. Surprisingly, under the sand, almost the entire skeleton was discovered in nearly pristine condition. Who was this mysterious figure? What led to their demise? How did the detectives identify that human, followed by his arrival at the shallow inlet of Sandy Point? Australia's state of Victoria contains the coastal community of Sandy Point. It is located on the nation's southernmost coast, not far from the Gippsland Lakes entry. Sandy Point is well known for its stunning sandy beaches, which make it a well-liked vacation spot for beachgoers and lovers of water sports. Additionally, the area offers opportunities for outdoor activities like birdwatching and fishing. On Christmas Day, 2017, a snorkeler discovered an enigmatic set of human remains there, off the coast of Sandy Point, Australia. Victoria Police reported the discovery to the coroner and sent the guy's remains to the Victorian Institute for Forensic Medicine without providing any background information or identifying information about the man. They were able to deduce several traits about the unidentified person when the expert team started their scientific experiments. According to the forensic scientists, the remains belonged to a Caucasian male who was 170 centimeters tall and aged between 21 and 37. In-depth examination of dental restorations by forensic odontology revealed that treatment done on the teeth suggested either that the person had not been an Australian or had passed away a very long time ago. The upper jaw of the individual was found, but not the lower. Testing for radiocarbon was unable to shed any light on the timeline. It provided a hardly specified 95% likelihood that the person lived between 1666 and 1942. The remains were used to create a nuclear DNA profile and a mitochondrial DNA profile. No match was discovered when the DNA profile data was checked to the Victorian Missing People DNA database. For identification purposes, the DNA profile was also uploaded to the National Criminal Investigation DNA database, but there was no match. The person was known as the Sandy Point John Doe because no one could identify him. There was once a rumor that Martin Weiberg's remains might have been among them. Martin, a ship's carpenter on the SS Avoca, was able to steal 5,000 gold sovereigns in 1877. These coins are now worth millions of dollars. On October 29, 1878, Martin was apprehended and taken to jail. After being detained for 6 weeks, he walked to the Tarwin River to show police where the remaining gold sovereigns were stashed. Weiberg attacked one of the cops during the search by punching him in the stomach before fleeing into the bushes. For an additional 5 months, he was able to avoid police apprehension. On a woodland track at Eagle Point in Paynesville, Australia, Weiberg ran into police once more. He was detained, transported to Melbourne, and given a 5-year sentence of hard labor. After being freed, Weinberg went to Hobart and bought a yacht. He took a small boat to shore to gather provisions after sailing the yard back to Waratah Bay in Gippsland Park. But the weather changed when he attempted to roll back to the yacht. Weinberg's little boat was discovered washed up on the strand the following day, and it is assumed that he drowned, though his corpse was never discovered. Of course, cutting-edge DNA analysis would be required to determine whether the remains belonged to Martin Weiberg. The goal of the Victorian Institute for Forensic Medicine was to identify this unidentified individual. They just started a program to investigate the application of forensic genetic genealogy to the resolution of various Australian cold cases, including this one. Scientists used forensic-grade genome sequencing to create an extensive DNA profile using forensic evidence that was sent to their Othram facility in the Woodlands, Texas. After Othram created the DNA profile, it was sent back to the detectives, who subsequently uploaded the profile to family history databases. The investigation yielded a compelling lead that pointed to Sandy Point's John Doe being Mr. Christopher Luke Moore, a Gippsland farmer and veteran of World War I who was believed to have drowned in Waratah Bay in 1928. At the age of 18, he entered in the military and served the 10th Field Artillery Brigade for more than 18 months. Christopher was in Waratah Bay on December 30, 1928, with his parents, Cornelius and Charlotte, brother Francis, wife Elizabeth, infant Mary and other family members, according to historical police and coronial records. A beachgoer attempted to save him, but the tide was too strong. Without success, Cornelius Moore searched the coast for his son for 10 exhausting days. Historical documents uncovered a fascinating turn. Just a few weeks after Christopher might have drowned, a local farmer from Sandy Point found a mandible near a shallow inlet. The fact that Christopher's father could tell the mandible was his son's because of the distinctive dental work. This identification was formally confirmed at the coronial inquiry on January 24, 1929. The state coroner most recently received the findings from the Victorian Institute for Forensic Medicines. A potential grandniece of Christopher Luke Moore was found living in Australia's Gippsland region. When the police got in touch with this important historical figure, she kindly cooperated and supported the family's tale of Christopher's drowning and the subsequent discovery and burial of his mandible. The grandniece gave a DNA sample in order to prove a direct line of descent. Confirmatory DNA tests verified the information. In July 2023, the discovery was made public that Christopher Luke Moore was, in fact, the Sandy Point John Doe. According to the family's testimony, it is established that Christopher drowned unintentionally and that there was no foul play. A 95-year-old case has finally been solved thanks to the work of the Victorian Institute for Forensic Medicine and Othram. On December 14, 1984, Heide Marie Erickson was born in St. Paul, Minnesota. She has two brothers, Peter and Joel, and was the daughter of John and Linda Erickson. When she was a young girl, Heidi gave her life to Jesus Christ and walked obediently by his side. She was described as a happy God's child. Her family and numerous beautiful friends loved her and reciprocated their love. At church in 2005, Heidi and Nick Firkus connected and soon after got married. Steve and Julie Firkus's son, Nick, was born on February 25, 1983. While Nick Firkus served as the director of operations for a carpet cleaning company, Heidi found employment at the financial services firm Securian. Both Nick and Heide Firkus and their parents were close. In 2010, the couple was going to be evicted from their home due to their financial struggles. They owed more than $15,000 on their credit cards. Heidi was unaware of any of this, but Nick kept their financial position a secret out of shame. At the morning of April 25, 2010, quite early around 6:30, 25-year-old Heidi used her mobile to dial 911. "Someone is attempting to break into their house," she shrieked. She screamed and could be heard gasping loudly. She appeared to be afraid. With a loud noise, the call came to an abrupt end. A second 911 call was placed from their home only 65 seconds later. Nick Firkus, her husband of 27 years, yelled over the phone, "My wife had been shot. Someone broke into our house. I've been shot." Officers discovered Nick at the site with a gunshot wound to his left thigh. He was on the ground next to Heidi and was chatting with the 911 operator and was being quite emotional. He was rushed to the hospital. A fatal bullet had struck Heidi in the upper back. She was discovered dead in the kitchen. Investigators noted how immaculate and clean the Firkus residence was. Additionally, the table in the hallway next to the front door was unaltered. They failed to locate any evidence of a struggle or of somebody forcing their way inside the house. According to Nick Firkus, he awoke to a strange noise at his front door. grabbed his shotgun from the closet, where he kept it for protection, and woke up his sleeping wife. Sergeant Jim Gray of the St. Paul Police Department was notified of the incident. They were both attempting to flee through the detached garage's back door. Nick claims that Heide came to a stop by the front door to retrieve her wallet from the table there. A man wearing a dark hooded sweatshirt, with the hood drawn tightly around his face, was standing when the door opened. He was probably 6'1" or 6'2". Firkus claimed that the individual grasped the shotgun's barrel during their struggle. His finger slipped onto the trigger, and the weapon fired. Heide was struck by the gunshot and collapsed to the ground. During the battle over the shotgun between Nick Firkus and the intruder, Nick was struck in the leg by the bullet. He stumbled, and the intruder fled out the front door. He informed the police that they were in danger of losing their home as a result of being overdue on their payments. He stated they had not informed any of their family or friends about the foreclosure or the need to vacate their home, but that they would do so, and that they planned to do so later that day. He claimed that they had intended to pack up their home on Sunday and Monday morning, store some of their belongings in the garage for later access, and find lodging. However, after the incident, pictures and video taken inside his refrigerator revealed that, despite having to leave the house the following day, not a single bit of packing had been done. Additionally, Heide had a Monday, April 26 job assignment. She didn't ask for a day off. 3 days before to her death, making preparations to get a pedicure on Sunday, April 25. In the afternoon, Heide texted a buddy. In this interaction, Heide was given the choice between this Sunday or the subsequent Wednesday for the pedicure. She decided on Sunday. It was clear that Heide was unaware of the eviction or the fact that they had to move to a new location when she recommended that they all go to church together that Sunday morning. A week after she passed away, Heide's funeral was held at the Calvary Church in Roseville, Minnesota. Numerous condolence notes for her parents, Nick, and their family poured in. She was recalled as a stunning young woman, and the neighborhood was devastated by her passing. There are the words "Joyous Child of God" etched on her headstone. A thorough neighborhood search and a canine search turned up no evidence of a trespasser. The fact that Nick Firkus repeated multiple fabrications to the investigators during interviews was unknown to them. When the police discovered no indications of a forced entry or any missing things, he was named as a suspect in the case. Additionally, there were no hints of an intrusion or a struggle in the background audio when detectives listened to the 911 call's audio. There was no evidence of a break-in, according to many witnesses, and investigators discovered just Nick's DNA on the gun. Attorneys for Nick Firkus asserted that the burglar could not have left DNA evidence because he was wearing gloves and was only inside the house for a brief period of time. Joe Friedberg, a defense lawyer Nick Firkus hired, advised him not to get in touch with the St. Paul Police Department. Nick Firkus rebuffed the investigators' efforts to meet with a police sketch artist to build a composite image of the claimed intruder on the counsel of his attorney. Friedberg stated on the ABC News, "No, we won't do that, because I knew they had used that as a pretext to attempt questioning him further. However, we'll do it and employ an artist." In their return to the St. Paul Police Department, Nick Firkus and Joe Friedberg brought their own sketch of the accused intruder, who Nick Firkus described as a man in his late 30s and dressed in a hoodie. In an effort to receive any tips, the authorities shared the sketch to the media. Police received a woman's identification of Michael Pye as a possible match. As soon as they began looking into him, investigators discovered that he had a history of breaking into houses in the early morning hours in St. Paul. Michael Pye was imprisoned on the day when Heide was killed. However, authorities later exonerated him of any participation in this case. Nick Firkus and Rachel Watson met a few months after Heide's passing. She thought he was the ideal partner for her. According to reports, Rachel is a kind, generous, and loving person who is always willing to provide a hand. She is also known for her kind and amicable behavior, which helps her maintain positive relationships with everyone around her. Rachel, who was also born in Minnesota, first met Nick Firkus through her sister Sarah and her brother-in-law David Olson, who are also good friends of Heide. Sarah was the one who insisted that Nick Firkus was a wonderful man who loved and always took care of his first wife. In fact, Sarah thought of herself as one of Heide's closest friends. Rachel fell in love with him, and they were deciding to get married. Neither Sarah nor David cared. After getting married in August 2012, the couple moved into a home that Nick's parents had bought for them. They had their first kid only a few months later. Neighbors who knew them said they were completely in love, and they even went on to have 2 more great children, which made them proud parents. But over time, Rachel started to question her husband's role in Heide's case. When she saw a notification warning them that their home might be foreclosed upon due to unpaid property taxes, she began to have concerns about her husband's participation in what had happened to Heide. According to their agreement, Nick and Rachel Firkus would give Nick Firkus's parents the money needed to pay the mortgage, and the county would receive the property taxes directly from him. She quickly recalled the information she had learned regarding Heide's passing. "I didn't realize this was occurring, and I'm living with this person," claims Rachel. "This person and I have children together, and when he previously experienced financial difficulties, a lot of things went wrong." In an interview, she said that she chose to approach him about it because she worried for her own safety. Before speaking to Nick, she sent their kids away and even made the decision to videotape the entire exchange. While speaking to his wife, Nick Firkus made no incriminating remarks, but it was clear he was concealing something. In one recording, she said, "The fact that you've been lying to me repeatedly and so easily makes me think." To which he responded that I can put an end to my wife's life, and she agreed. Rachel's anxiety persisted until she could take it no more and filed for divorce from him in 2019. Rachel claimed to a BC in 2020 that she had a completely different perspective on the 2010 incident after discovering Nick Firkus telling a substantially similar falsehood. The St. Paul Police Department Sergeant Nicole Sipes changed her approach in 2019. She stated that Heide's case-by-case approach has always disturbed me because the circumstances did not seem to suit what had occurred. As soon as Sipes learnt about Nick's recent divorce from his second wife, she contacted Rachel and expressed her concerns that Rachel might also have been a victim. According to Sipes, for the first time in May 2021, Nick Firkus was detained and charged with murdering his first wife. According to the research, Nick Firkus received foreclosure papers in June 2009, 10 months before to Heide's murder. Their home was also sold at a sheriff's auction in the same month. On March 8, 2010, an eviction hearing was held after eviction papers were filed. Nick Firkus was the only one present. The original lockout date for 2010 was April 9. Nick Firkus called the lawyers and requested a date change for April 26, since his grandmother was in hospice care. Investigators did not discover any proof that his grandma was in a hospice or had passed away in 2010. Investigators searched through correspondence between the couple and financial records discovered in the house, but were unable to discover any evidence that Heide was aware of the imminent eviction. The trial for Nick Firkus began in February 2022. Defense said she was aware of the foreclosure and potential eviction. On the other hand, the prosecution claimed that she wasn't aware and that her husband was in need. The complaint claimed that on April 26, 2010, the day following the murder, Nick Firkus had done almost no packing and had kept Heide fully in the dark about their impending eviction. Investigators have gone over all of the text conversations and emails that Nick Firkus and Heide Firkus exchanged. There is not a single message that mentions a foreclosure or eviction process or that indicates they will soon have to leave their home. On the other hand, Heide wrote in an email to a friend on March 11, 2010, "I wish we weren't bound to our house so we could move somewhere fun." No paperwork signed by Heide is in the possession of the law company handling the foreclosure and eviction, and its agents have never spoken to Heide. Their only communication was with Nick Firkus. Investigators have interviewed with Heide's family, friends, and co-workers, and not one individual said that Heide ever mentioned a need for housing or a place to keep their items, or that she was facing eviction due to a foreclosure. Numerous times in April 2010, Heide wrote Nick Firkus about setting up a meeting with JSA Realtor, who assisted them in purchasing their home and was also a church acquaintance. In his reply, Nick Firkus mentioned that JS had been in touch with him. In an email to Nick Firkus, dated April 23, 2010, Heide inquired as to whether JS had been in contact. JS said, "He's ready to meet when we are," Nick Firkus retorted. "I told him it should be a good Monday." When JS was questioned by the police, he admitted that it had been over a year since he last spoke to Nick Firkus, and that there was no Monday meeting planned. In order to demonstrate that the shots were likely not unintentional during the struggle, but rather premeditated, the FBI also coupled their ballistics tests with a virtual representation of Heide and Nick's home. However, Nick's lawyer argued that these discoveries did not necessarily refute his account of what happened. The big question was finally posed by the prosecutor. Did you play any part in the tragedy that claimed Heide's life? Absolutely not, according to Nick Firkus. The Ramsey County prosecutors claimed that Nick Firkus killed his wife out of humiliation over their impending eviction after keeping their financial woes from her, assuming not just his house would be lost. Either it was going to be the knowledge that he had lied to both his wife and his friends. For many years, he had misled the neighborhood. He killed Heide in order to preserve his reputation, according to Ramsey County Assistant District Attorney Elizabeth Lemon. At the trial, where she assisted Ramsey County prosecutors in obtaining the conviction, Senior Assistant Hennepin County Attorney Rachel Crater made a statement. The trial went on for 11 days. On February 10, 2023, the jury convicted Nick Firkus guilty of Heide's murder after 4 hours of deliberation. Nick's defense lawyer, Robert Richmond, contested these accusations, but he was nevertheless found guilty of all the crimes brought against him. Firkus was convicted in April 2023 and given a life sentence without the possibility of parole. This case was finally solved after more than 10 years, but it might not have been if Firkus's second wife Rachel hadn't caught him in a major lie. Nick Firkus' family released a statement in support of him, despite declining an interview request from ABC News. According to them, he is currently incarcerated for a crime he did not commit after being wrongfully found guilty. Part of the statement states, "This is not just the belief of grieving parents. Families and friends of Heide were finally able to say goodbye after 13 years. In a statement, they said this because we were under pressure to believe the lies that were spread about her, even the day after she was killed. Due of the shock that follows what happened to Heide, it has been incredibly difficult for us to find comfort in our loss. The realization that what Nick Firkus was telling us was a lie as to who I knew my sister to be came over me swiftly. It was, and still is, extremely insulting and upsetting to me and everyone else who truly knew and loved her," according to Heide's brother Peter Erickson, that he had the arrogance to spread a narrative that was so blatantly contradictory with her character. "I'm truly missing my sister." Nick's actions, according to Heide's mother, Linda Erickson, who was fighting back tears, deprived her daughter and her loved ones of the opportunity to share in her life's experience. She remarked of Heide that she looked forward to being a mother. Jesse added to it, "Because of Nick Firkus, never again do I get to see my friend. Heide is missing out on a lot of things. Right now, still a resident of St. Paul, Minnesota. Rachel runs her own cosmetics business, Be Pretty. She also speaks out strongly in support of those who have been victims of human trafficking. Apparently, reports indicate that Be Lovely provides 10% of each transaction to charities that support victims of human trafficking and other social injustices. It's wonderful to see Rachel succeed. The Minnesota Correctional Facility in St. Cloud, Minnesota, is where Nick Firkus is incarcerated for life, without the possibility of release. On February 16, 1979, Monica Faye Pritchett was born in Anniston, Alabama. She has 2 sisters and 2 brothers, in addition to being the daughter of Donald and Dorothy Pritchett. Her high school sweetheart, Jeremy Rollins, and Monica got married and settled down in Heflin, Alabama. Up to the birth of their second son, Aaron, they enjoyed a happy marriage. But after that, due to factors they never made known, the couple made the decision to live apart. Despite Monica being expecting their 3rd child, this occurred. Midway through 2001, Monica and the boys settled into their Sugar Hill Road home. Every other weekend, Jeremy Rollins could still see his 2 sons under the terms of his visitation privileges. Monica had a deep love for her kids. Erin was 2 years old and Dalton was 6. With only a few weeks till the birth of her 3rd baby, Monica was ecstatic. She had already decided to name him Shane. She was a working mother, raising her 2 sons while juggling a full-time job. Before accepting a higher-paying position at ITC Deltacom in July 2002, she worked at a daycare center named Kitty Castle. After work on September 13, 2002, Monica and her sons went to see her father Donald Pritchett in his Anniston home. Finally, he could present Dalton, his oldest grandchild, with a present that he had prepared. Dalton received a bird as gift, which he named Mojave. Conversation, playing, supper and horseback riding took up the entire evening. At 8:30 p.m., back at their Heflin residence, Monica and the boys departed. To spend more time with Monica's father and his wife, they intend to come back later that weekend. However, as the weekend passed without hearing from Monica, family members made the decision to go check on her. On Monday, September 16, when they got to Monica's mobile home, they could not have been prepared for what they would discover. Monica and 6-year-old Dalton were brutally murdered in their own home. During the attack, Monica appeared to have given birth as a result of shock. The infant was discovered dead and just partially delivered. Aaron, a 2-year-old boy, was discovered in a closet, hiding alive and unhurt. A family member dialed 911. Jeremy Rollins, Monica's ex-husband, finished his 12-hour shift at Southwire that day, about 6 o'clock, and left for home. Officers visited his home a short while later and informed him of what had occurred. He was invited to visit the police station. Officials claim that Jeremy Rollins was immediately eliminated as a potential suspect and that he cooperated with the inquiry the entire time. Jeremy expressed his emotions after learning what had occurred to Monica and Dalton after being ruled out. According to early press accounts, Monica and Dalton both died as a result of stab wounds they sustained at some time during the weekend. If you reside in a tiny town with a population of fewer than 3,500, you pretty much know everyone. One of those towns is Heflin. When a triple homicide occurs in a place like Heflin, it shakes the town to its very core, especially when the victims were a young pregnant woman, her little son, age 6, and her unborn baby. The crime frightened the neighborhood, and people began enhancing their home security measures and keeping their children inside. Monica was characterized by family members as a laid-back, caring mother who was good with the children and always had a smile on her face. Debbie Clark, the owner and head of Kitty Castles, said that she was always happy, a good person, and the little boy was truly precious. The Chapel of Dryden Funeral Home hosted funeral services for Monica and Dalton on September 19, 2002. Their final resting place was to be in the Cedar Creek Cemetery. However, before the burial, detectives made the decision that more DNA needed to be gathered for their investigation. Governor Siegelman announced a $10,000 prize on September 20, 2002, for information that would result in the capture and conviction of the perpetrator of this heinous act. The public was given very little information regarding the murder. As a method of investigation, the Heflin Police Department maintained the information's secrecy even decades later. They had the opinion that the murderer would someday reveal information about the killing that was never made public, which would result in an arrest. DNA fingerprints and other evidence were gathered at the site and transferred to the Alabama Department of Forensic Science for investigation, according to Captain Joe Neighbors of the Alabama Bureau of Investigation. Budget restrictions at the time caused the department to have a significant backlog, which caused a delay in processing. The Heflin Police Chief, A.J. Benefield, made contact with the Attorney General's cold case team in June 2014, and the two organizations began cooperating. They started conducting interviews once more after learning fresh information. They visited with local prosecutors and the State Bureau of Investigation and began fresh conversations. Police Chief Benefield was a police officer when the murders took place. His partner and he reacted to the relative's 911 call after discovering Monica and her son's deaths. In 2014, Benefield stated the following in regards to the case. "So really, there were 3 victims, and it was the worst crime scene I have ever seen. There isn't a day that goes by that we don't talk about this. As a result, we are quite passionate about working on it in some capacity." Benefield made a vague suggestion in 2015 that they were looking at someone they had known about since 2002, but he did not go into more detail. The Alabama Attorney General's office joined the inquiry in March 2015. Authorities frequently published requests for information on the case on social media. Unfortunately, no helpful leads were received, and the case became unsolved for a while. Captain Scott Bonner and Chief McLaughlin restarted the investigation into the case in 2021. They resent various materials to both private and public forensic labs. They made an effort to offer as much support as they could and kept in touch frequently with some of the family members. Captain Scott Bonner stated that there was a suspect and evidence, despite the fact that they could not go into specifics because the investigation was still ongoing. The suspect in this case currently poses no threat to anyone. He claimed the unnamed person was being held in another state for unrelated charges. More than 20 years after the incident, investigators were still able to make an arrest thanks to assistance from the state, grant money from Seasons of Justice, and a real truckload of evidence. On June 26, 2023, Louis Landon Spyway was taken into custody and accused with killing Shane and Monica Dalton. Heflin Police Department issued the news to the general public on June 30, 2023, but Louis Spyway kept the scandalous information to himself until he was let go from the Florida prison. He was 18 years old when he did that terrible crime in 2002, and he is now 39 years old. They had a relationship, according to Captain Bonner, who said they were friends. A motive or the circumstances leading up to the killings were not disclosed by Bonner. Louis Spyway has been imprisoned in Florida for the past 15 years for an unrelated Bay County robbery and violent assault case, for which he was given a sentence in February 2010. Louis Spyway was taken into custody by Captain Bonner and Chief McLaughlin upon his release from the Florida prison. Louis Spyway has since assisted with the investigation. According to Captain Bonner, before we opened the case, he was investigated by other agencies quite early on. Good research yielded some promising leads for us. According to Bonner, we did not have cameras or surveillance pictures as you would have nowadays. Louis Spyway allegedly offered detectives a detailed confession, outlining the murder and accepting sole responsibility for the killings when they sat down with him. The date of the bond hearing was June 29, 2023. The court ruled that Anaya's law had been invoked, which resulted in Louis Spyway's protracted pretrial detention without the chance of bond. Anaya's law is a law that is named after Anaya Blanchard, a college student whose life was sadly cut short in 2019. The legislation intends to toughen Alabama's laws against some violent crimes. It enables courts to refuse bail or parole for anyone accused of some violent offenses, guaranteeing that they are detained throughout their trial. The purpose of the statute is to safeguard potential victims and prioritize public safety by removing dangerous people from the streets while legal proceedings are ongoing. Few specifics were provided by the investigators regarding what caused the case to break. However, we are aware of the confession, the fact that the department received funding for DNA testing, and the processing of a number of things by Canadian private and public labs. Chief Ross McLaughlin issued a statement on behalf of Mayor Robbie Brown, expressing his sympathy to the Dalton and Monica's family. Hopefully, this will help you put a positive end to this terrible chapter in your life. We would like to express our sincere gratitude and appreciation to Captain Bonner, the Heflin Police Department, as well as to all the other organizations and people who showed steadfast commitment and tenacity in their efforts to bring Monica Dalton and her mourning family to justice. According to investigator and Captain Scott Bonner, it was unquestionably the most challenging case he had ever worked. It took several months just to sift through the box of reports and everything else we had to do. For Bonner, this situation ended up becoming personal. Over the past 3 years, he acknowledged he has likely spent more time with Monica and Dalton's family than he has with his own. I've grown quite close to them. I feel glad that I can give them some serenity, he remarked. In 2011, Jeremy Rollins, Monica's former husband, remarried. He and his wife Erin Rollins have twin daughters. The second son of Monica, who graduated from high school in 2018, is now in his early 20s. The household is still located in Heflin. Louis Spyway was sent to the Cleburne County Jail, where he is currently being kept in custody without a bond while awaiting trial. On January 9, 1992, Melvin Douglas and Carla Pittman McJones welcomed Destiny Renee Pittman into the world in Kokomo, Indiana. 5 kids all, including her 2 brothers and 2 sisters, made up Destiny's family. In 2013, at the age of 21, Destiny was living at 815 James Drive in Kokomo with her boyfriend, 2 young children, a female flatmate, and 3 pets. On the evening of February 7, 2013, 2 armed attackers broke into Destiny's house. Destiny exited her room and entered the hallway to confront the trespassers. One of the assailants then shot her fatally. The wall at the end of the hallway was hit after the bullet passed through her chest. At the time, Renee's boyfriend, flatmate, kids and dogs were at home, but they all ran away in fright and escaped uninjured. When the Kokomo Police Department received the word that shots had been fired at a home at around 9:33 p.m., officers were sent to 815 James Drive. Destiny had already passed away when police arrived at the crime site, and there was nothing they could do to bring her back. There was only one .40 caliber shell casing found. Her flatmate and boyfriend, whose identity was never revealed, were not present when the burglars entered, so they were unable to provide police with a description. It was thought that the suspects might have intended to steal Destiny and her boyfriend of the marijuana and money they had made from selling it. Just days before the home invasion, Destiny's boyfriend reportedly confessed to authorities that he sold marijuana and had transported a bag containing marijuana and more than $2,000 in cash to another property. Police were informed by the boyfriend and the flatmate that Destiny was also involved in selling, though less actively now that she had inherited money. Sadly, detectives were unable to pin down the attackers, and the case was closed. Destiny's case went unresolved for more than 10 years without even a single suspect ever being named. Her surviving family and friends were grieved by Destiny's passing. Years later, her mother continued to be depressed and to cry a lot. "My life has completely turned upside down," she remarked, "and I hope and pray to God that someone will have anything to say. They abducted my child without cause. I hope they are happy, whoever they were. They received nothing from it. She was merely preparing to begin modeling and build a life for herself." Uncertainty about who did this to her daughter or why eats at her every day, according to her mother. 2 men were ultimately named as suspects in the case of Destiny Pittman on March 2, 2023. The 32-year-old Joey McCartney and the 36-year-old Jesse McCartney have been detained, according to investigators. At the crack of dawn, U.S. Marshals arrested Joey McCartney at a house in Graham, Kentucky. About 2 hours later, at a house near Kokomo, U.S. Marshals and local police detained Jesse McCartney. There is a longer than 4-hour journey between Graham and Kokomo. Investigators with the Criminal Inquiry Section were able to establish that these 2 people were accountable for what occurred to Destiny as a consequence of the ongoing inquiry since 2013 and citizens' persistent provision of leads. A woman contacted on December 5, 2022, claiming to know anything regarding Destiny's situation. She informed police that after viewing press reports on the case over the years, she could no longer keep this information to herself. The court records state that this informant claimed to have been with Jesse McCartney the night that Destiny's life was taken and to have been waiting outside Destiny's house in his white Jeep Cherokee. She said that when Jesse and Joey claimed to be out on an errand, they were actually carrying out a deal that involved illegal drugs. According to reports, Jesse instructed the informant to remain in the car as he put on black leather gloves and reached for his handgun. Jesse and Joey McCartney entered Destiny's home together after Joey met Jesse at the front entrance. When Destiny and her boyfriend were selling drugs, the 2 of them began searching the house, according to the authorities. Both males rush out of the house after hearing a gunshot, according to the source. Jesse had a sizable bag of marijuana, money, and was visibly perspiring. The informant claims that she and Jesse returned to his flat by car, where Joey later joined them. She claimed that Jesse even forced her to pass the house again the following day. The house was surrounded by police tape when they drove by. Additionally, the source informed authorities that Jesse McCartney had changed his phone number but continued to reside on Monroe Street in Kokomo. She added that 6 months after the incident was committed, he sold his Jeep and weapon. The woman admitted to detectives that she delayed coming forward because she was and still is afraid. She allegedly knew Jesse from before. After learning about the new information, police showed Destiny's boyfriend photos of Joey and Jesse McCartney. The boyfriend commented that Joey seemed familiar and said they may have met before through a mutual friend, but it was still unclear to investigators whether Destiny knew the McCartneys. The 2 men are each accused with murdering Destiny and breaking into a house. Robbery and drug possession were 2 additional allegations brought against Jesse McCartney. The brothers' hearing was scheduled for March 2023, while they were being jailed without bond for their alleged involvement in the case. On August 11, 2023, Jesse McCartney stood trial. He was found not guilty of some of the counts against him, since it was established he did not fire the fatal shot. The trial for Joey McCartney is still pending. A 39-year-old victim called the Charlotte Mecklenburg Police Department in North Carolina in June 1994 to report that an unidentified guy had broken into her home and assaulted her while holding a knife. DNA from the male was taken from her body and examined, but at the time, DNA technology was not developed enough to identify the perpetrator. In 2018, more analysis of the evidence was done. The forensic evidence from the scene was connected in 2019 to a different assault that happened in Columbia, South Carolina, in 2010. In 2022, forensic genetic genealogy was used by detectives to locate a person of interest. Then, forensic data was delivered to Othram, where researchers used forensic-grade genome sequencing to create a thorough genealogy profile for the unidentified guy. The Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department received investigation leads from its internal genealogy team after using a genetic genealogy search. The case was still being worked on by investigators, and their subsequent inquiries resulted in the gathering of a DNA sample from a person of interest. After years of intensive forensic testing and evidence review, the DNA profile for this person of interest matched the DNA profiles for the unknown subject that were collected from the assaults in 1994 and 2010. James Wayne Ingersoll, born in November 6, 1972, was the suspect according to the Cold Case Unit and Crime Lab of the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department. The Violent Criminal Apprehension Squad of the police department tracked down and captured Ingersoll in Concord, North Carolina, in May 2023. The Columbia Police Department and South Carolina Law Enforcement Division also provided assistance. The arrest has been reported to the victims. This case is the subject of an active, ongoing investigation. The Public Affairs Office of the CMPD will provide updates when new information becomes available. Call 704,432 TIPSE and ask to speak with a detective if you have any information regarding this occurrence. The general public can provide information by anonymous calling Crime Stoppers at 704-334-1600. James Wayne Ingersoll may be responsible for other crimes, according to investigators. Ashley Parlier, who was 21 at the time, got into a heated fight with her parents, Russ and Sherry Parlier, on June 12, 2005. This made her storm out of their home in Battle Creek. She still hadn't arrived at her house a week later, so her family filed a missing persons report. The search for her whereabouts lasted more than 10 years in vain, until 18 years later, when her family and the cops finally got the answers they had been desperately looking for. Where would Ashley have disappeared to? What ultimately led to the knowledge of what had occurred to her? Located in the state of Michigan, the 2020 census estimated that Battle Creek was a home to over 50,000 people. The city has a mix of outdoor leisure areas and historical attractions, which fosters a close-knit neighborhood where people know one another by name and take part in daring activities. Despite the friendly and welcoming culture, there are serious safety concerns in the city because violent crime rates are far higher than the national norms. This situation made the community's anguish over Ashley Parlier's disappearance in 2005, which left locals shocked and in search of explanations, much more intense. Ashley Parlier was welcomed into the world on October 16, 1983, by her parents Russell Jr. and Sherry Parlier. She was the second child in the Parlier family. Her early years gave the impression of a young girl who was on the quieter side of things. This was more a function of her intrinsic nature than a lack of excitement for life. In fact, Ashley's older sister, Nicole, frequently made jokes about her special traits and unwavering faith in people. Ashley sought out the best in everyone with her dark brown eyes and grin that displayed slightly misaligned but extremely attractive teeth. Nicole recalled that she had a sincere belief that everyone was kind-hearted, just as she had envisioned. Despite having a moderate mental disability that limited her cognitive skills to that of a 12 to 14-year-old, Ashley never let that to define her. She had a strong, stubborn spirit. She obtained employment at the neighborhood Taco Bell after graduating from Battle Creek High School, which was situated in a busy section of Northeast Capitol Avenue. Her aspirations of getting her very own car began to take shape with each payday. She withdrew a small portion of her salary, daydreaming about the independence an automobile would provide. Nevertheless, despite Ashley's optimism and ambitions, life had other ideas. For someone as trusting and compassionate as Ashley, the world was sadly not prepared to return her kindness, since the unforgiving twists of fate waited in the shadows. She felt really optimistic about the future. Nobody was aware that a difficulty was coming to cloud her upbeat view. Ashley Parlier, age 21, stood 5 feet 9 inches tall and weighed little under 100 pounds. Even the smallest physical alteration was certain to draw attention from someone of her size. This was especially true for her adoring parents, who on the fatal day of June 12, 2005, discovered an odd lump on her daughter's body. Ashley's parents' first worries centered on her well-being because of her kind nature and exceptional mental aptitude. The potential health repercussions added to their concerns, and they were eager to have her examined. If Ashley were to carry a kid, they believed that prenatal care was crucial. However, no one found the awareness of the issues or the debates that followed easy, least of all Ashley. The mood in the Parlier home in the urban area of Bedford Township became more and more tense. Ashley was upset and hurriedly left her home after a furious disagreement. She just took a few things. She had about $700 in cash. She didn't have a car, a license, a phone, or a credit card, so this money was her only option. At first, it was assumed that Ashley needed a quick break and some time to settle down. The Parlier family held on to the dream that they would even spend a day or two at a friend's house. A growing sense of dread started to engulf the Parlier family as the minutes turned into hours and the hours into days. The family's optimism gradually gave way to fear as they initially clung to the belief that Ashley had sought refuge at a friend's home and would soon return. Each missed call and doctor visit from someone other than Ashley weighed heavily on their emotions and made their once bustling home unnaturally quiet. But as the days went by, their worst nightmares started to materialize into a terrifying reality. The Parlier family decided to call the police after recognizing they could no longer wait and that something was seriously wrong. Their hopes had been replaced with anguish and dread. The investigators started looking into Ashley Parlier's mysterious disappearance right once. The evidence appears scant at first. The public was shown a picture of Ashley wearing a checkered shirt, blue trousers, and brown leather sandals in the hope that someone had seen something that would help identify her whereabouts. Although Ashley had a distinctive and unique physical appearance, her emotional state before going missing was of utmost importance. The case became more complicated as a result of her unplanned pregnancy, susceptibility as a result of her mental capacity, and the significant argument she had with her family immediately before she went. Multiple reports of Ashley's sightings came in from the Houghton Lake region, which seemed like a good lead. Hopes for her safe return somewhat eased the family's desperation. This glimmer of hope, however, was fleeting, as each reported sighting proved to be a dead lead, leaving the family and the investigators equally unhappy. The detectives then concentrate on Ashley's closest friends and family. Her parents, Sherry and Russell Parlier, came under scrutiny, particularly as a result of the delay in reporting her disappearance. Sherry denied the polygraph test, citing health concerns, whereas Russell gladly agreed to it and passed. Sherry was later found to be displaying early signs of Huntington's disease. Ashley's sister, Nicole, emphasized how unusual Ashley's extended absence was, and noted how out of character this behavior was for her. After the intense disagreement, the family had simply assumed she was cooling off at a friend's house and had been waiting for her to return home. This foolish notion caused them to delay calling the police, complicating the inquiry. As the police made attempts to contact Ashley's ex-boyfriend, who is thought to be the father of her unborn child, but whose identity has not been made public, the web of suspicion expanded. He was dating another woman at the time who was also carrying his child. He wasn't excluded from the investigation as a suspect, but there was no proof of his involvement in her disappearance. The detectives followed a variety of clues as they dug deeper, some of which hinted that Ashley might have been mentally unstable. In an effort to locate information that would offer some closure, this prompted the police to hunt grimly for a body. But they turned up nothing. According to a different hypothesis, Ashley had been robbed. But that was ruled out because her social security status remained unchanged. The depressing reality crept in as each day went by. Reluctantly, the detectives came to the conclusion that Ashley might have been the victim of fraud. They believed she had passed away. Despite their best efforts, the Battle Creek Police Department saw that the case grew colder with each passing year. Numerous officers investigated Ashley's strange disappearance over the course of 18 years. Although there were multiple people of interest on the once hot trail, none of them had any solid proof against them. In a shocking turn of events in 2020, claims that Ashley may have been murdered outside of Bell Creek City surfaced, which caused the case to be turned over to the sheriff's office. Unexpected progress in 2021 gave the case a second chance to be solved after it appeared to have reached a dead end. But as the years passed, the light of optimism faded. Once a hot case had run out of leads, and it was now a frozen tundra of mystery. The leads had almost completely disappeared, despite the investigators' best efforts, leaving them in a frigid state of uncertainty, with no fresh information, no solid proof, and a host of unanswered inquiries. The disappearance of Ashley Parlier case had once more become a cold case. Every so often, a surprising flash of unexpected information might rekindle hopes of solving a protracted mystery in the complex web of cold cases. That turning point in the Ashley Parlier case originated in Pennsylvania, which was unexpected. In January 2021, officials from Calhoun County got a transmission from Pennsylvania law enforcement, which astonished them. A 44-year-old man named Harold David Holman III was being questioned by Pennsylvania authorities in depth. Not just any suspect, this one was. He had a reputation as a serial killer. The investigators working on Ashley's case were instantly interested in this news. What information about Ashley's disappearance could possibly be revealed by questioning such a notorious felon? Although the name Harold David Holman III might not instantly come to mind, it has a somber past. Harold, who was born on November 29, 1978, spent some of his adolescent years living with his father in Germany. However, young Holman decided to stay in Germany with his girlfriend while his father relocated to Turkey, giving the impression that he was just another young man to the outside world. However, appearances can be misleading. Holman committed his first note murder at the age of barely 20. Joseph Whitehurst, the 21-year-old son of a colonel in the Air Force, was his victim. Whitehurst was viciously clubbed to death, and his body was found outside Ramstein Air Base. Holman confessed while being held in German custody for another reason, claiming self-defense. Holman was given a moderate 6-year sentence and sent to a reform school because of his age and schizophrenia diagnosis. After being released, he came back to the United States, got a job as a truck driver, and settled in Lakeview, close to Battle Creek. Around this time, he started to play a role in the tragic 2005 disappearance of Ashley Parlier. On June 13, 2018, a mother of two named Tiana Phillips disappeared after 3 years. During Holman's interrogation, he said he hadn't planned to kill Phillips specifically. He just had the impulse to kill. Erica Schultz is another. She vanished on December 6, 2020. He casually compared her murder to a regular day at the park while connected to home and using phone records as evidence. When ultimately caught, Holman was discovered hurt among the lines of the Pennsylvania Railroad. He considered his deeds to be sins that required atonement. He admitted to killing both Schultz and Phillip while he was in the hospital. He detailed his crime against Phillips in a letter to his estranged wife that he wrote later while incarcerated in an evil effort to demonstrate his love for her. Holman has an interesting pattern. His victims vanished and sustained head wounds. He would strike to render them unconscious, then leave their remains in isolated areas. He committed horrifying, organized crimes. Holman's sinister ideas and intentions weren't always obvious. He was interested in serial killers out of curiosity and had sophisticated notions about power dynamics. In relationships, he thought there should be a clear balance of power, with one person being dominating and the other being submissive. He looked for that interaction with someone else when his wife didn't play the submissive role. Holman was able to recall every aspect of his crimes when questioned. He was well familiar with them. He acknowledged that if he wasn't caught, he would kill once more. While Pennsylvania detectives were looking into the horrible crimes committed by serial killer Harold David Holman, 44, in 2021 on the 3rd, they made shocking discoveries regarding Ashley's situation. Holman shocked the officers by requesting that the cases of Phillips Schultz and Parlier be combined after identifying 2 additional victims, Tiana Phillips and Erica Schultz, who he had slain while being questioned in a hope to avoid several trials. The investigators were taken aback by this mention of Parlier. They hadn't discussed her situation during their conversation. Their initial confusion gave way to increased curiosity. Could Holman be the missing piece in the disappearance of Parlier? When the detectives pursued the Parlier connection further, they encountered a startling confession. Holman openly admitted to having a morbid fascination with murder. "I just wanted to feel how it felt," he stated, according to the quote. For him, there was no activity or substance that could compare to the feeling of ending someone else's life. He committed his violent crimes as a result of his insatiable curiosity. His statements formed a picture of a mentally troubled person. The detectives promptly contacted the Calhoun County Police Department to inform them of the new developments in the Parlier case after learning of this shocking confession. The investigators looking into Parlier's case went to question Holman as soon as their curiosity to learn more details from him piqued. Investigations conducted afterwards confirmed Holman's connections to Ashley Parlier. Records show that Holman lived in Battle Creek from 2002 to 2009, a time frame in which he communicated with the missing girl. The cops put together a chilling timeline as they dug deeper. Ashley took refuge with Holman in Emmett Township, Michigan, following a dispute at her home. He offers her comfort in regards to her family's worries and the potential for her to become pregnant. This encounter, however, took a fatal turn. The two got into a heated disagreement that ended with Ashley being attacked by Holman. He carried her away to the isolated Pennsylvania hills in a dark twist. He took her life there in a quiet place. In some ways, Holman's admission brought the tragedy to a close, but it also exposed its depths. He remembered disposing of his blood-stained garments and leaving Ashley's body in Newton Township's northern section. Holman provided further details about his interactions with Ashley Parlier while the questioning was still ongoing. His admission made it clear that they had first met while she was there with her parents at a gathering. This fortuitous meeting resulted in a chat between the two, opening the door for a closer bond in the days to come, and it recounted the events of a crucial day. Ashley reached out to him when she and her parents had a fight, not because he was a part of any scheme he had thought up, but because she appeared to trust him. Ashley discovered information regarding the pressure she had from her parents to take a pregnancy test when she visited him. What came as a shock was Holman's admission that he was the father of Ashley's expectant child. The environment became tense as a result of this disclosure, which resulted in a confrontation between the two on the evening of June 13, 2005. In the heat of their argument, Holman's rage erupted. He hit Ashley, knocking her out cold. About 10 miles outside the town, He took her to a remote spot described as an overgrown field in Michigan. A depressing situation was set against a remote spot with a nearby garage, or perhaps an abandoned home. Holman remembered the unsettling nature of the circumstance, with Ashley's still body in the rear of the car and the stillness all around. He noticed that there were no passing cars, which confirmed his impression that this was the perfect spot to kill Ashley. He recalled the incident, saying how he got Ashley out of the car, killed her in a fit of rage, made sure she was dead, and then drove home to wash away all the evidence. Later, at the popular American supercenter where he was employed, he dumped his bloody garments. Uncomfortably, Holman's participation in Ashley's case continued. He acknowledged returning to the location years later and finding Ashley's skeletal remains. He then apologized to the Parlier family for his confession. He expressed regret, saying that the murder of Ashley was the crime he regretted the most out of all the others. The Ashley Parlier case involved police work that was nothing short of relentless. They worked non-stop for almost 20 years, looking for information and solutions in their quest to return Ashley to her family. And despite the numerous difficulties the case faced, their dedication was unwavering. Therefore, when Harold Holman's confession surfaced, officials had hope. They requested him to specify the precise place where he had left Ashley's remains in order to verify his account. This wasn't simply another case, according to both the officers and the prosecutors. It required endless hours and resources over the years and was extremely emotional. Over the years, there have been a number of investigators involved in this investigation who have all been committed to learning what really happened to Ashley. Their hunt went well beyond the boundaries of the city as local leads dried up. They traveled all over the country, contacting prospective witnesses and looking for any clues in diverse locations like California, Maryland, and Pennsylvania, with important members from the Michigan State Police's Detective Sergeant Chris Suara, Detective Dave Hominger, and Detective John Pignataro from the Calhoun County Sheriff's Department. The investigation team was strong. Their combined efforts brought them to a wooded area in Newton Township, just south of Battle Creek, along a 6.5-mile road. Nearly 20 officers searched the region extensively on March 30, 2022, in an effort to find any signs of Ashley. However, hours passed without any luck. Locals stated that the surroundings had substantially changed since Ashley's disappearance, which added another level of difficulty. Over the years, parcels of what was once farmland had been sold to different owners. Despite the focus of the search and the optimism sparked by Holman's admission, a substantial obstacle materialized. After so many years, Holman found it difficult to recall where he had left Ashley. The once familiar scenery had changed due to local developments over the years, making it challenging for him to locate the location. The hunt for Ashley continues despite the absence of any remains. Police are still fully committed to solving this heartbreaking crime, and they never give up hope. Considering the complexities of such investigations, Harold Holman's trial in the Parlier's case followed a pretty straightforward course. It's crucial to remember that Holman had previously been found guilty of the killings of 2 other women by the time he went on trial. The proceedings were hampered by this dismal track record. Even with these earlier offenses, it was surprising to hear Holman express an actual fear of the death penalty. Prior to the trial, Holman was detained in the Luzerne County Jail. In February 2023, he chose a wise legal course of action. Holman admitted to killing Ashley Parlier in the 2nd degree. He had a deal in mind when he made the plea. Holman agreed to help Calhoun County Police find Ashley's remains after consulting with the Laverne County District Attorney's Office. He would be spared the imminent threat of the death penalty in exchange. Both the defense and the prosecution presented their cases during the trial. Holman's defense most likely emphasized his plea deal and cooperation with the authorities. The prosecution, meanwhile, emphasized the seriousness of his conduct, particularly in light of his prior convictions. The most anticipated testimony was Holman's own, so to speak. He looked at his prior confession, and even though no fresh testimony was given, his admission carried weight. The conclusion was inevitable. The individual who took many lives would not be eligible for parole. Instead, Holman would be handed 2 life sentences, with a 3rd life sentence pending his sentencing in April 2023. Despite the fact that Holman's legal ordeal appears to be coming to an end, in Ashley's case, there is still a search for resolution. The Calhoun County Sheriff's Office is still looking for information that could lead to the discovery of Ashley's remains. One is advised to contact the Calhoun County Sheriff's Office directly at 269 781 880 if they have any information on the case. They are still as committed as ever to getting the information they need. The family of Ashley Parlier was plagued by the matter for almost 2 decades. Tragically, Sherry and Russell's parents died in 2020, never knowing the outcome of their daughter. For Ashley's sister, the suffering grew worse over the phone. She discovered that Ashley had asked Holman for assistance just to have him mercilessly betray her. Nicole's sorrow was evident. The difficult aspect is that my parents were not present to hear this. She wept, thinking of her family's misery and the mistrust that surrounded them. Nicole made connections with the sisters of the other victims and shared their sadness. They stood as one, remembering their loved ones rather than the man who had taken them away. Nicole firmly remarked, "We're going to remember how they were good people." The family was able to find closure after the finding. They now know the heartbreaking reality, but the search for Ashley's remains continues. On July 20, 1971, 52 years ago, a peculiar case came to light at the Burlington police station when 24-year-old Rita Curran was found killed in her apartment by her roommates. This heinous crime caused alarm throughout the entire community. Despite a comprehensive initial investigation, the case ultimately went cold, and it would take more than 50 years for it to be resolved. How did detectives identify the culprit after more than 50 years? Why was it so difficult to track down the murderer? Burlington is located in Vermont, a state in the United States. The city is renowned for its extensive heritage, which includes historic neighborhoods, museums, and monuments. It is renowned for housing Champlain College and the University of Vermont. Burlington, the county seat of Chittenden, has Vermont's largest population. It lies 95 miles south of Montreal and 45 miles south of the Canadian-American border. In the middle of this tranquil city, Rita was brutally murdered in 1971, shattering the entire neighborhood and leaving Burlington scarred for years. On June 21, 1947, Rita Curran was born. She was the first child born to Thomas F. Curran and Mary Eleanor Donahue Curran. Rita left her parents' house when she reached 24 in order to work as a second-grade teacher. She began sharing a Burlington apartment with 3 other people. She was enrolled in graduate classes at the University of Vermont during the summer of 1971. She also had a part-time job as a chambermaid at a nearby motel. She was a driven young woman living her best life with a promising future. Rita had no idea that on July 19, 1971, her life would be violently taken from her. Rita Curran lived in a tranquil suburban neighborhood, and the evening was ordinary. A horrible event struck this tranquil village, forever destroying its beauty, as darkness fell over the lovely surroundings. Rita had spent the earlier part of the evening at a local event with friends. Around 9:30 p.m., Rita, who is well known for her friendly disposition, said her goodbyes and headed for home. It was impossible to foresee that this would be Rita's final sighting. On July 19, Rita was said to have returned home at 11:20 p.m. There were indications of an altercation when her housemates showed there at around 12:30 a.m. A small decorative table had fallen over, and the furniture was partly open. They were horrified to find Rita's lifeless body in her bedroom when they went looking for her. They called 911 right away to report the incident. Rita Curran, 24, was found dead in her Brooks Avenue apartment in the Vermont city of Burlington on the terrible night of July 20, 1971. Everyone's world was completely upended. Her murder's perplexing circumstances led to a thorough inquiry. Numerous pieces of evidence, including hairs from the victim's hands, fingernail scrapings, torn sheets and nightgowns, hair curlers, and a cigarette, were discovered at the murder scene. However, these things also included biological material, including blood. But they offered no information on the murderer. All evidence was useless because DNA technology was not sufficiently developed in the 1970s. An investigator collected a sample to contrast the soil from the basement with that from the reader's bedroom. A substantial amount of blood was removed off the door and an area of the linoleum floor. For latent fingerprints, the bedroom floor where Rita was found was inspected. The apartment's window was left open, allowing the murderer to flee. In order to keep her from contacting for assistance, they also disconnected the phone line. The FBI assisted with processing material early on in the investigation. Rita Curran's autopsy was conducted by Chief Medical Examiner Dr. Lawrence Harris, who determined that Rita Curran died from asphyxia, brought on by physical strangulation. She had suffered severe beatings and assaults. Homicide was ruled to be the cause of death between 11:20 p.m. on July 19 and 12:30 a.m. on July 20. Within a 70-minute span, Rita was murdered. Detectives frequently visit to the apartment complex and the neighborhood around it to question residents about anything they may have seen or heard on July 19. State Trooper again knocked on the second and third floor apartment doors of Rita's building 3 days after Vermont's murder. This time, the residents on the second level were present, but the 4 women were unable to offer helpful information to the investigation. When the police knocked on their door a second time, looking for information concerning the night Rita was killed just 2 stories below them, William DeRoos and his wife Michelle were on the 3rd story. The husband and wife claimed to be at home, but that nothing out of the ordinary had happened or been heard that day. Over 100 people were questioned during the initial investigation, and at least some of them agreed to take a polygraph test. In 1971, detectives created a suspect list. There were more than a dozen names on the list. However, Rita Curran's family would be left in the dark towards the end of 1971. A $3,000 covert witness reward was revealed by the Burlington Free Press. The award was mentioned on several occasions in 1972, but no news of a breakthrough in the investigation was made public on the first anniversary of Rita Curran's murder. The case gradually went cold because there were no leads to pursue. Although Rita's brother and other family members remained hopeful decade after decade, remaining current strong for one another and for Rita. More than 50 years after her death, Rita's father Thomas died in 1991 and her mother passed away in 2002. Both of these deaths occurred without knowing who had taken their daughter's life. By the year 50, in 2021, that hope had vanished. In 2014, Detective Jeff Beerworth was engaged in a reoccurrence case where he discovered evidence that might contain DNA data that had previously been challenging or impossible to obtain over the earlier 10 years of the investigation. He was intrigued by the Lark cigarette butt he had found behind Rita's right elbow, but her housemates didn't smoke that brand. As a result, it appeared likely that someone other than the tenants of the property had smoked the cigarette and dropped or somehow placed it in the middle of the crime scene, preferably with DNA that can still be extracted. The OCME, or Office of Chief Medical Examiner, in New York City, was able to analyze the cigarette butt and obtain a male DNA profile. The DNA profile was entered into the combined DNA index system, but no match was found at the time. This could have been because the probable suspect had not been convicted of a felony prior to or since Rita's murder, or because his profile had not been added to the database as of 2014. They decided to turn their attention to family comparison techniques after finding no hits in CODIS. It's a method that has attracted a lot of attention lately, both good and bad, and has assisted in the identification of suspects in a number of high-profile cases around the nation. In 2022, the DNA was sent to Parlier nanolabs for sequencing. In order to conduct more in-depth family tree research, the results were also sent to GEDmatch Family Tree DNA and other genetic genealogy websites. In the event of a recurrence, it is also a tool for law enforcement to conduct their familial DNA study. The genealogical study for Rita's case was carried out by C.C. Moore, the principal genetic genealogist of Parlier Nanolab. After receiving the list of suspects accumulated over the course of the investigation's last 50 years, C.C. started her inquiry. The reopened investigation had expanded the list of suspects with previously unidentified identities. Thus, before it reached C.C., the list had a number of new names on it. Among the arrivals was William D. Roos, an upper tenant of the Brooks Avenue building. Lieutenant Triebe considered his proximity to the crime site to be a powerful link. Since the police had spoken with him and his wife during numerous canvasses of the neighborhood, his name had also appeared in a number of reports in the initial case file. When examining the additional evidence, the technicians at DNA Labs International were not made aware that a family DNA comparison had indicated the likely identity of the DNA donor on the cigarette. DNA Labs International found that the wood pieces taken from the apartment's rear door had blood on the linoleum square. The cigarette had the same DNA, but it was attributed to an unidentified source. After some time, it was discovered that the DNA on Rita's housecoat came from the same source. The DNA profile on Rita's underwear was later found to be a mixture of at least 2 different people, including DNA from the unidentified source and another person. These results were significant because they showed that the cigarette was not just a red herring that was thrown at the murder scene without any real significance to the case. It also showed that garments torn from Rita's body during the attack contained DNA from an unknown source. It was impossible to rule Rita's housecoat or underwear out because William D. Roos' DNA was found all over that cigarette butt. It was becoming more and more obvious that he was the one who committed the terrible act. Detectives needed to get a sample from William D. Roos's nearest living brother for direct DNA comparison in order to confirm the results of the familial DNA test. Andy D. Roos, who was discovered by a detective from the Burlington Police Department, assisted police with their investigation and provided a DNA sample for comparison with William D. Roos's. The sample was sent out to be matched to the profile found on the Lark cigarette, but the report indicated that Andy had a 97.3% chance of being related to the sample as a half-sibling. Williams de Roos's wife at the time of the murder, Michelle Roach, was questioned as part of the new inquiry. They got married on July 5, 1971, just over 2 weeks before Rita Curran was viciously attacked and killed 2 stories below their own apartment. The detectives displayed Rita Curran pictures to Michelle. She complimented Rita on her beauty, but failed to recognize her. She couldn't remember ever interacting with any of the other residents of the Brooks Avenue apartment building, much less having a formal introduction. Michelle does, however, remember being awakened by a policeman who told her that someone had been gravely hurt. The rest of the conversation with the police was lost to her memory. She did, however, remember what her then-husband told her after the policeman left. Michelle was warned by William not to mention that he wasn't at home when the murder occurred. His justification was that he had a criminal history and didn't want the police to try to pin the incident on him. William wasn't home, though, for the brief 70 minutes when Rita Curran is said to have been beaten and killed. Michelle told detectives that she and her husband of 2 weeks had gotten into a fight and that he had gone for a stroll to calm down more than 50 years later. Michelle was unaware of the date or duration of his absence. She had no recollection of his clothing, whether he had washed that evening, or whether the clothes he was wearing had disappeared soon after. Also, she couldn't remember if he had any scrapes or other wounds when he came back. Although Michelle was aware that William smoked cigarettes, she couldn't remember what brand he used. She admitted to the detectives in the 2022 interview that if she had any doubts that her husband was responsible for Rita's demise, she would have called the police. Michelle asserted that she never directly questioned William DeRoos about the death of Rita Curran. It was unfathomable that he could commit such a horrific act. A significant figure in the decades-long cold case involving Rita Curran being the enigmatic William DeRoos, a man with a problematic past. Rita Curran, a singer and instructor, was 24 years old in 1971 and shared a residence with DeRoos, a 31-year-old man. Their lives were inextricably linked on the sad evening of July 20, 1970, when Curran was brutally killed in her Brooks Avenue apartment. During the initial investigation, DeRoos, who resided directly above Curran, came into sharp focus. After the murder, DeRoos' life took a series of perplexing turns. He started a journey out of Vermont that led him to Thailand, where he made the decision to live a monastic life. The shift in him startled those who knew him. Darkness seemed to be pursuing him. Despite his spiritual quest, he started to suspect a criminal history. DeRoos' life, however, was cut short in 1986 when he died in San Francisco from a drug overdose. His death marked the conclusion of a chapter. However, the skepticism and worries about him persisted. It wasn't until 2022 that DeRoos was brought up in connection with the recurring case. DNA testing and investigative genetic genealogy have provided new details regarding his alleged involvement. The course of events might have changed if DeRoos had been alive at the time of the reinvestigation. DeRoos would have been apprehended based on newly discovered DNA evidence, fabricated testimony, and re-examined facts when investigators had put the events of that terrible night in 1970 together. The Ramsey case is a powerful testament to police enforcement perseverance, amazing forensic technology advancements, and an unrelenting dedication to upholding the rule of law. Rita Curran's legacy can now be appreciated as both a tragedy and a testament to tenacity, showing us that even the most elusive solutions can be found when perseverance and modern science are combined in the search for the truth. In 1952, 3 years after her parents had relocated from Ireland to England, Eileen Cotter was born. Patrick Cotter, her father, worked as a labourer. Eileen, at 15 years old, discovered her mother's body in 1967 after she tragically committed suicide. At age 16, Eileen dropped out of school to work at a summer camp on Wales's Barry Island. Later, she managed to obtain a job at an Irish nursing facility. On June 1, 1974, just after 2 p.m. a tenant of an apartment building in Hamilton Park, Highbury, North London, noticed what she initially mistook for a pile of rags in the courtyard next to a collection of garages. It was identified as a body by another resident who requested her father to notify the police. The female body was declared to be dead by the police when they got on the scene. The body was identified as Eileen Cotter's. Eileen, who was 22 at the time and had one eye that was black and had injuries on her face and neck, was discovered strangled. Her tights and underwear were pushed down, leaving her lower body exposed as she lay face down. Her shoes, handbag and glasses were all gone. After her body was discovered, Eileen Cotter's father issued a statement describing his daughter's brief life, which had been blighted by family tragedies. Her body was examined by a forensic expert. Manual strangulation was the reason, according to a pathologist. On Eileen's body, DNA samples were found in 2 different locations. Unfortunately, no matches could be found when DNA profiles were extracted from the samples. In their search for the attacker, police questioned 92 prospective suspects and conducted a thorough operation to locate neighborhood curb crawlers. Sadly, he was never located, and her case was never resolved. Following developments in DNA analysis, the investigation was restarted in 2012, 37 years after Eileen's body was discovered. For 7 more years, no one was found until 2019, when John Appelgren was apprehended by police for assaulting his wife, Anne Smythe Appelgren. He shared a neighborhood with Eileen at the time the incident was committed. The 80-year-old pensioner, John Appelgren, formerly worked as a bricklayer and a minicab driver. He is from South Africa and has 2 children there, with a woman he had previously been married to. Although many sources refer to Anne Smythe Appelgren as his 3rd wife, it is unclear whether she is actually his 2nd or 3rd wife, because there are no specifics about a 2nd spouse. He was detained for domestic violence in February 2019 by his ex-wife, Anne Appelgren. When police for the first time collected Appelgren's DNA breakthrough occurred, there was a 1,000,000,000 to 1 chance that the sample would match the DNA from Eileen Cotter's body. He admitted having relationships with other women while he was married, despite his initial denial during an interview that he knew Eileen. John Appelgren was detained and charged with killing Eileen Cotter on June 22, 2022. Investigators came to the conclusion that Appelgren is solely accountable for what happened to Eileen, leading to the arrest. If someone came to his house and arrested him for a crime committed nearly 50 years ago, according to Detective Chief Inspector Lawrence Smith, he would keep pleading his innocence until he was unable to do so. Not him at all. He handled it with great coolness. He exuded, dare I say it, a wicked atmosphere. On June 23, 2022, Appelgren made an appearance at the Bromley Magistrates Court and was subsequently remanded in custody. From June 6, 2023, the judge set a trial that might last up to 4 weeks. Prosecutor Alexandra Healy began the prosecution's case by stating that the DNA samples taken from Eileen's body in 1975 matched those of John Appelgren of Sydenham, southeast London, and Brighton Close. She informed the jury throughout the trial that Appelgren had been arrested by police in 2019 for assaulting his wife. Appelgren was reportedly saw the night of the murder in 1975 at a Finsbury Park hot dog stand frequented by Eileen. As she detailed to the court, Eileen's body was found in the position it fell, without shoes and with her tights and underpants still around her right leg. Miss Healy also told the jury that it appeared Eileen had been forced out of a car after she and Appelgren had engaged in sexual activity. Before throwing Eileen's body out of his car, Appelgren punched her in the face and choked her. At the time, the defendant was 31. 6 weeks had passed since the birth of his first kid with his then-wife Anne when this occurred. Appelgren lied to authorities in 1975 when he was questioned about being a suspect, saying that he lived in Leighton and never visited the Finsbury Park and Highbury region. Eileen never pulled her tights up after they were together, according to Miss Healy. Thus, she did not have the defendant's DNA on them. She was no longer living, so she never pulled them up. Eileen and Anne are most definitely not Appelgren's sole victims, the court case found. On October 14, 1972, Appelgren assaulted a female guest who was 18 years old at his own wedding to Anne Appelgren. The incident, according to Miss Healy, was only discovered years later when police spoke with Anne Appelgren as part of their 2012 reinvestigation into Eileen's case. Mrs. Healy testified before the jury that Appelgren assaulted the 18-year-old after she exited the restroom at his wedding celebration. The victim was frightened of being held accountable since she had kept the incident a secret. After the couple's divorce, the adolescent notified Anne Appelgren about the attack. Additionally, Anne Appelgren, a mother of two, admitted that she had been harassed and that Appelgren had once seized her neck with both hands. She continued by saying that she suspected he was having an affair only a few months after their 1972 wedding, and later discovered he was having an affair with her brother's wife. Mrs. Justice made the jury's verdict public after 11 hours of deliberation. She informed Appelgren that it should have been evident that tightly pinching a young woman's neck entailed a considerable risk. Eileen must have been afraid, the judge said. After a 2-week trial, the jury convicted Appelgren guilty on Friday, June 16, 2023. He was convicted of both indecent assault and manslaughter in addition to the crime. Appelgren was then given a 10-year manslaughter term by the court, plus an additional 6 months to run concurrently with the earlier assault. This indicates that on June 21, 2028, he will be eligible for parole after 5 years and 3 months hopefully when he is 85 and unable to harm anyone else. In an effort to show leniency, Justin Rouse noted Appelgren's medical issues and claimed that the defendant would suffer grave consequences from serving his term. Eileen's life was sadly cut short at a young age, according to Detective Chief Inspector Lawrence Smith, and her body was afterwards dumped on the street. My team and I were impressed with the initial investigation's depth when we studied it. At the time, investigators employed every tool at their disposal, including operations involving dummy women, to find the perpetrator. Female police officers under protection were stationed at crime sites at the time as part of a strategy to entice predatory men to the scene. Unfortunately, they did not have access to the science that we do today, Smith continued. Furthermore, he has finally been brought to justice, even though he ought to have been in jail years before. The Metropolitan Police prioritizes looking into cases of violence against women and girls, and we will pursue predatory men with vigor, whether a crime was committed now or decades ago. Patrick Cotter, Eileen's half-brother, who was 5 years old when she passed away, said in a statement, "Eileen and I had the same father. When Eileen's mother passed away, my mother treated her like one of her own. Not only did I lack a sister, I had a limited time to get to know. My mother committed suicide as a result of the knock-on effects, and my father died from alcoholism and mental illness. All of this resulted from John Appelgren killing Eileen. The relationship between my mother and my father had considerably deteriorated 3 years after Eileen's murder by strangulation, and as a result, my mother committed suicide. I was put in a care facility as a result of their fighting, where I was abused until I was about 11 years old. I was never told the reason I was taken into care, and for the majority of my childhood, I thought it was because I had done something bad." His explanation goes on. Again, as a young child, I had trouble understanding and was given scant information. The loss of my mother and Eileen made my father's already excessive drinking worse, and he eventually checked himself into the psychiatric hospital in Springfield. My father then relocated to Ireland to live with his brother, but his excessive drinking led to his demise as well. Patrick Cotter Jr. claims that he has no recollection of Eileen's funeral and is unaware of whether she was buried or cremated. He is also unaware of her final resting place. He had never been able to go to her grave because of this. "I had a pretty difficult childhood," Patrick said, bouncing about in different foster homes and care facilities. "But when I was 14 years old, John and Yvonne, my foster parents, took me in. I had the great fortune of being housed in a kind, caring environment. They filled in the blanks, so to speak, about many areas of my life that I didn't know or comprehend. In addition, I had a half-brother who was 17 years older than me and was my mother's child. He was instructed to stay away from me when I was placed in care. I felt as though I had also lost him. He was someone I cherished and with whom I have wonderful memories, but this was also snatched from me. In his final statement, Patrick Cotter said, "I would like to see justice served for Eileen, whose life was cruelly taken 49 years ago. Due to the horrible experience I had as a child, I emotionally retreated. I've found it challenging to establish trusting relationships. My sister is only vaguely in my memory, but I know that she loved me." A 12-year-old girl followed a barking dog in the Provincetown, Massachusetts dunes at Race Point on July 26, 1974. The young child discovered a body that was starting to rot. The remnants are only a few yards from eroding, and there was a lot of insect activity around. Tire traces were discovered 50 yards from the location, and 2 sets of footprints led to the body. The victim was sprawled out on a beach towel, face down. No evidence of a struggle was present. She either knew the attacker or had been dozing off, according to police speculation. The fact that the beach blanket and sand were undisturbed at the scene raises the possibility that the body was transported to the precise location where it was discovered. Under her head were a pair of Wrangler jeans and a blue bandana. Her long auburn or red hair was pulled back into a ponytail by an elastic band with gold flecks. She had pink-painted toenails. According to assumptions, the woman had an athletic build, stood around 5 feet 6 inches tall, and weighed 145 pounds. Additionally, she had expensive dental work done, including crowns that cost $500 to $1,000 and other teeth that had been extracted. One forearm, along with the victim's both hands, were all missing. She may have been strangled, but she was also close to being decapitated. Her head had been crushed on one side, presumably with a trenching implement of a military nature. The woman's autopsy revealed that she passed away about 2 weeks before she was discovered. Her age was uncertain. It was possible that she was as young as 20 or as old as 49. The missing teeth, hands, and forearm, according to some detectives at the time, suggested that the offender was trying to conceal either their identity or that of the victim. Police looked over countless missing people reports and a list of authorized automobiles that had been spotted in the neighborhood. There were none found. Despite thorough searches of the nearby dunes, no other evidence was discovered outside the denim bandana, blanket, and ponytail holder. The victim's identity remained a mystery despite the best efforts of the investigators. She earned the title Lady of the Dunes. October 1974 saw the burial of the deceased. Sadly, the case went cold after that. In 1979, the woman's first clay facial reconstruction was produced. The exhumed remains were examined in 1984, but no new information was found. In March 2000, the body was once more unearthed for DNA analysis. In May 2010, her skull was subjected to a CT scan, which produced photos that the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children later used for another reconstruction. The original thin metal casket had rusted and worn away over time, so one of the case investigators donated money in 2014 for a new one. There were many leads, but none of them proved to be helpful. A Canadian woman informed a friend in 1987 that she witnessed her father suffocate a woman in Massachusetts around 1972. Police made an effort to find the woman, but they were unsuccessful. Another woman reported to the authorities that the victim's reconstruction resembled her sister, who had vanished in Boston in 1974. But in the end, this was not the case. Rory Jean Kissinger, a missing criminal who would have been 25 years old at the time of the crime, was the subject of another investigation. In 1973, Rory Jean managed to escape from custody. Rory Jean and the victim resembled each other, according to the authorities. However, the victim's mother's DNA did not link her to other missing women. Vicki Lamberton of Massachusetts and Frances Mary Ewalt of Montana, were also disqualified. There were also many different suspects and hypotheses regarding the case over the years. Investigators discovered in 1981 that a woman who resembled the victim had been seen with gangster Whitey Bulger around the time the woman was allegedly murdered. Teeth extractions were a specialty of Bulger's. However, he passed away in prison in 2018 without any evidence of a connection to Bulger. Initial suspect, Tony Costa, a repeat criminal in Truro, Massachusetts, was eventually ruled out. On May 12, 1974, Costa passed away, while the victim was discovered in July 1974. At one point, a man by the name of Haddon Clark admitted to the police that he had killed the Lady of the Dunes. Authorities find that Clark had paranoid schizophrenia, a condition that can cause someone to make up a confession to a crime. In a letter to a friend in 2004, Clark confessed to killing a woman in Cape Cod, Massachusetts. He also included 2 drawings, one of a naked woman lying on her stomach without any clothes on, and the other of a map indicating the location of the body. In April 2000, Clark took law enforcement to the location where he said he had buried 2 victims 20 years before. In addition, he admitted that between the 1970s and the 1990s, he had killed many additional people in different states. He was never directly connected to the Woman of the Dunes case by investigators. The 1975 movie Jaws, which was shot on Martha's Vineyard, notably the settlement of Menem Shah, roughly 100 miles south of Provincetown between May and October 1974, was the subject of rumors that the Woman of the Dunes may have been an extra in August 2015. After reading in The Skeleton Crew just weeks prior about how amateur sleuths are cracking America's coldest cases, Joe Hill, the son of horror author Stephen King, alerted police to the situation. Hill noticed a woman in the audience while watching the 4th of July beach scene in the movie who was dressed similarly to the victim, including wearing a blue bandana and pants. What if hundreds of millions of viewers of a popular summer classic saw the young victim no one has ever been able to identify without realizing they were gazing at her? Even though the primary investigator expressed interest in it, other investigators have dismissed it as a crazy rumor. The skeleton remains were delivered to Othram in 2022. These were utilized to create a DNA profile that was later used to locate the victim's long-lost relatives. The victim had been identified as Ruth Marie Terry, according to an announcement made by the FBI field office in Boston on October 31, 2022. There was no information provided about any probable suspects or the reason Ruth was in Massachusetts when she was killed. Investigative genealogy, which has been used to identify over 150 perpetrators and over 150 additional unidentified victims, was reportedly utilized to determine Ruth's identity. Ruth Marie Terry was born on September 8, 1936, in a hut on a Tennessee mountaintop to Johnny and Eva Terry. Eva Terry died in 1957 at the age of 23, just after giving birth to Ruth. Ruth left White well after a brief marriage in 1958 to work at the Fisher Body Car plant in Livonia, Michigan. Despite giving birth to Richard, she was unable to care for him because of her financial situation. She gave her son up for adoption in exchange for Richard Hanchett Sr., the superintendent at her place of employment, paying for her expenditures. Ruth moved to California when the adoption process was completed, and she left Livonia. In 1972, Ruth tried to get in touch with her son, but he wasn't ready because of a heroin overdose that had put him in a coma for 18 days. She wed Rockwell Moldavan, an antiques merchant in Reno, Nevada, on February 16, 1974. A couple paid a visit to her family in Whitewell 4 months before she passed away. Later, Ruth's grandma Brittany Novongloski recounted how Ruth would not be her normal self around Moldovan because of his possessive behavior. After that, the couple traveled to Chattanooga to see Ruth's half-brother Kenneth and his wife Carol. Later, they remembered Ruth and Moldovan saying they planned to visit the U.S. in search of antiques. Kenneth also saw that, as they were departing, they talked about going to Massachusetts. Moldovan went back to Tennessee in the late summer of 1974 to inform Ruth's relatives that she had vanished from the couple's California house. He stayed for a little period of time and merely informed them that he was unaware of Ruth's whereabouts, according to Jan Terry, her sister-in-law. James, Ruth's brother, went to California and hired a private eye to track her down. Ruth's family was informed by the investigator that all of her possessions had been sold and that she had left the state voluntarily after joining a religious cult. Ruth was recorded as being deceased in family obituaries for the 20 years before her examination. Some relatives conjectured that she was enrolled in a witness protection program and was unable to get in touch with them. The Massachusetts State Police said on November 2, 2022, that they were looking for information about Ruth's husband, Guy Rockwell Moldovan. On October 27, 1923, he was born, and on March 14, 2002, he died. Moldovan was an orphan who was adopted by Sylvia Lily Silverblatt, Michael Semyon J. Moldovan, Abram Albert Zadwaransky Moldovan, and Sylvia Lily Silverblatt. Moldovan studied acting at the American Academy of Dramatic Arts while residing in New York City in 1942. Due to a mastoid illness, he was ineligible for active duty in the military during World War II. In Bellevue, Pennsylvania, on May 11, 1946, he married Joellen May Loop while still employed as a professor. Following Moldovan's employment as a disc jockey in Seattle, Washington, the couple lived in New York, California, and finally Seattle. On July 16, 1956, the couple filed for divorce. In Kootenai, Idaho, on September 30, 1958, Moldovan wed Manzanita Mearns. Dolores Ann, Manzanita's daughter from a previous union, was then 18 years old. On April 1, 1960, both ladies vanished in Seattle, with Moldovan emerging as the main suspect. A few days later, their bodies were discovered in a septic tank. To avoid testifying about their deaths, Moldovan fled Seattle, but was caught by the FBI and charged with unauthorized flight. He was never accused of killing them, but he did spend 15 months in prison for fleeing without permission in order to avoid delivering a witness. In King County, Washington, Moldovan wed Evelyn Marie Emerson on July 29, 1960, not long after. On August 10, 1963, in Los Angeles, they were remarried. Moldovan later faced larceny charges for defrauding his third wife's family of $10,000, approximately the time his second wife vanished. He was found guilty on these accusations in 1961, and he received a 15-year prison term. In March 1962, a judge commuted the sentence under the condition that Moldovan pay back the money. Author of True Crime, Anne Rule, devoted a chapter to Moldovan in her 2007 book in relation to what happened to his second wife and her daughter, and she went into great detail about the police's attempts to link Moldovan to the crime. Moldovan is also the main suspect in the murder of 28-year-old bread truck driver Henry Lawrence Red Baird and the abduction of 17-year-old waitress Barbara Jo Kelly in June 1950. When Barbara left for a date with Baird on June 17, 1950, she was last spotted in Humboldt County, California. The following morning, her partner Baird's body was found lying face down on the sand, close to a table bluff. He had been hit in the back of the head by a bullet. He was completely naked, but for his shoes and socks. Except for her shoes and stockings, Barbara's personal apparel was discovered neatly folded and placed beneath the rest of his. There was no sign of Barbara herself. Since then, there has been no word about her, and it is believed that whoever shot Baird took her. Around 1976, Muldoon relocated to Chuala, a small town in the vicinity of Salinas, California. He had retired from his position as executive vice president of a silver store on Rodeo Drive in Beverly Hills, according to a feature piece written on him in 1985. According to his description, he was a volunteer host of a 3-hour call-in show about aging, growth, and life transitions at Pacific Grove radio station KAZU. He also had a job in Carmel at a cigarette store. His obituary stated that he died after a protracted illness at his Salinas home. He was regarded as an artist, actor, and poet. He was born in Santa Fe, New Mexico. His sister Joan Towers of Salinas and his wife Phyllis Moldovan both survived him. The incident involving Miss Terry in 1974 was ruled to be Mr. Moldavan's fault based on their research, according to a statement made by Cape and Islands District Attorney Robert Gallibois on Monday, August 28, 2023. The investigation has now been concluded. Investigators are also considering the possibility that Moldavan may be linked to more crimes, he added.